All right. Oh. Maybe not. All right. Good morning. Thank you, Love Inc., for being here this morning. We appreciate you coming and helping out and all the ministry you're doing in this community. And so thank you. Vicki is here this morning. If you would like to, Vicki and Michelle, if you would like to meet with them, ask them questions, they're sitting right there. They will be out there after the service is over. So please ask them questions and meet with them and talk to them about this awesome ministry that they have. And I was thinking as Jeremy started, I got to thinking, I've got like one day till I have to go back to work. So 100 days. Come on. All right. Let's pray. God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love and your grace. And we just pray right now that, Father, we would listen for your voice and that we would listen to your message and lay it upon our hearts. And may we live for you each and every day. In Jesus' name, amen. So we've been in this series called Home Improvements, and we have been looking at the family since Mother's Day. We're going to continue for the next couple weeks until we get to Father's Day. And we've been looking at different aspects of the family. In the first week, we talked about mothers who are encouraging. The second week, we talked about the necessity of discipline with our children and raising them appropriately. Last week, we looked at this family as the foundation of the nation and said that the revival isn't going to start in the White House. Revival needs to start in your house and in my house. And so we looked at that as the foundation. This week, we're going to continue on this series, and we're going to look at teaching our kids respect, teaching them respect. I think in our nation right now, we see a gradual fade in respect. There's a lack of respect, especially when it comes to young people. I mean, you don't have to go far. You go to the grocery store, or you go to the schools, or, just about anywhere, and you see a lot of kids being disrespectful. And when I see that, I feel sorry for those children, because I don't believe it's their fault. I just believe they have not been taught to be respectful. So this morning, we're going to kind of dig into that. And the way I want to do that is I want to look at 3 different times of the day when we can teach our kids respect. And I want this to be kind of a visual message today. And so we're going to kind of just go from different stations. And the first station we want to look at, a time of the day that you can teach your children respect is at mealtime. It's at mealtime. And so you're going to sit down every day, maybe not every day, but a lot of days, and this is where you can teach respect. I mean, this is an awesome opportunity right here, for you to start teaching your kids respect. So we begin with the mealtime because this is 1 hour, give or take a few minutes, where you meet on a regular basis and you can reap some incredible benefits. Now, I'm not even saying that you need to do this 7 nights a week. I mean, if you can make it a goal to sit together as a family 4 nights, 5 nights a week, and have dinner, supper, whatever you call it, together, that's great. We're going to eat supper together. We're going to eat dinner together these 4 nights, these 5 nights this week. And here's what happens, and this is what the statistics have proven. There's a 40% better chance that your children will get A's and B's in school. They are 3 times less likely to experiment with drugs. They are 2 times less likely to experiment with alcohol and cigarettes. And they are 40% less likely to be obese as they enter into adulthood. And all that comes from just sitting together and enjoying a meal together at night. And study after study has confirmed this. One of my favorite studies was done by Dr. Catherine Snow of Harvard. She followed and worked with 65 different families over an 8-year stretch, and here was the conclusion that she came to. Dinner time is of more value to child development than playtime, school time, and story time. More valuable than school time. Why? Because it's stabilizing. It breeds security. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Deuteronomy this morning, Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy, first of all, is in the Old Testament, in case you're not sure. It is 5 books in from the very beginning of the Bible. So you got Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and then Deuteronomy. And in Deuteronomy chapter 6, there's a passage that you're probably pretty familiar with. It's actually re-quoted in the New Testament a couple times, especially by Jesus. But it's Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, and that's where we're going to start. And listen to how this passage starts in verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. In other words, you are the one and only God. There is only one God. The Lord is our God. Verse 5. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Now, where have we heard that before? Jesus quotes that as what? The greatest commandment. The greatest thing you can do. In Matthew 22, he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your mind. Then we pick up in verse 6, and this is written just for families. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, and when you lay down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and your gates. Now, Deuteronomy doesn't specifically say mealtime. But when I think of sitting down together, that is when I think most of us sit down together. You know, I mean, it's our time together is at mealtime. And so that's what I think about. And this table represents something. It gets across the idea that something deeper is taking place around this mealtime. I mean, if you think about it, throughout the Bible, there are often a lot of different passages that talk about mealtime or are centered around mealtime. Why? Because it's a place where relationships are deepened, where relationships grow. Something deep is happening during those mealtimes. If you look at the ministry of Jesus alone, all right, look at his ministry. In Luke chapter 19, we see Jesus go to the house of Zacchaeus for what? For a meal. What happens during that meal? Spiritual awakening in the life of Zacchaeus, and he would never be the same again. In John chapter 12, we see Jesus having a meal with Martha and Mary and Lazarus at their house. What happens? There's this kinship that is formed and this relationship that is strengthened. Think about it. Why did the Pharisees get so upset with Jesus when he would eat with the prostitutes, the tax collectors, and the sinners? Because what takes place during mealtime? Relationships are strengthened and grown. And they didn't like the fact that he was growing in relationships with these people that they would call sinners. It made them upset. It made them mad. You see, this is a setting where you can teach manners, where you teach respect, where spiritual truths begin to take root. And in our fast-paced society, going in all different directions, it's difficult. And the older our kids get, the more difficult it gets. And I honestly think this is one of Satan's tools because he wants to keep us separate at mealtime. Because he knows when we come together for a meal, that's when relationships are strengthened. And I know some of you, you're in a season where you have a child playing sports or maybe you have multiple kids playing sports, and it becomes difficult. So you've got to get creative. You've got to decide, hey, you know what, we're gonna get creative. We're gonna have 4 or 5 meals together this week. One of them might be at 4:30 in the afternoon. One of them might be at 8:45 in the evening. It's not optimal, but which is more important? What's the most important thing? And you use those meal times as an opportunity to teach your children to get along, to encourage one another, and so that they encourage each other as well. Here's a couple of examples from families. I wish I would have learned these years ago. As I was looking at talking to some families and learning some things from families of what they do at mealtime. One family has what they call the fruit of the Spirit plate. And so this plate is set at a different person's setting, maybe not every night, but they use it occasionally or frequently. And so when that person gets the fruit of the Spirit plate, everyone else prays for that person and prays for one of the fruits of the Spirit that they have kind of lived out in their life. So they might give it to little Johnny. And little Johnny, that night they pray and say, it's so good to see that little Johnny expressed joy today. He's living the fruit of a spirit of joy. Even though he got cut from the team, he could be sad, he could be upset, but he has decided that he is going to live joy. And so you pray for that individual. And there's another one that they use, the You Are Special plate. All right, and it's just brought out for special occasions like Dad gets a raise, he gets the You Are Special plate. Child gets an A on the exam, You Are Special plate. Someone gets their driver's license, You Are Special plate. And you pray for that person and what's special about them that day. And I know that some of you are looking at this and you're going, well, I got a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old, and they're going to think this is kind of hokey. Yeah, they probably will. They probably will. It's not going to go over well. But if you start when they are young, they will begin to look forward to it. Now, I didn't do these things. I wish I would have. One of the things I did do with my girls is Valentine's Day was a very special day. They were my Valentines. I considered my daughters my Valentines too. And so every Valentine's Day, I would prepare a special meal for those children, with flowers and cards and candles, and it was just for them, and they got to where they looked forward to that. And so you do these special things. You do that for them. Who's going to be the special person? Who's going to be the fruit of the Spirit's person? And so you're teaching them respect. You're practicing and showing respect. You're showing them honor to one another. And so through your interaction, this is what happens. You learn to communicate with your family. You learn how to show respect. You stay at the table until the meal is over. And guess what else is not involved at the table? Cell phones. No cell phones at the table. No electronic devices at the table. Not allowed. All right? You take an hour away from those things. But you come up with creative ways to get involved. One family said that they have a box of questions. So if at mealtime it gets boring and no one's talking, they'll pull out a question. And these questions are life situations that apply to maybe age-appropriate situations. So one of the questions they said might be, you're walking out of Walmart and you find a wallet with some money in it. What do you do? And so you talk about that and you discuss that. And it teaches them respect. It teaches them spiritual truths. So mealtime, great place to learn respect. We're going to move on. Because the second place where you can learn respect is travel time. Travel time. All right, and this is a great place. Now, I wanted to bring in a car. We couldn't get it in here. Thought about coming through the bell tower. It's going to fall anyway. But decided not to do that. But listen to this. Again, this passage. These commandments that I give you today are going to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road. When you walk along the road. Now, when I think about travel time, I realize in the midst of this world we live in, it's busy, it's hectic, it's frantic at times. You seem to be going in different directions. It doesn't seem like a time that you could build depth unless you become very intentional about using this travel time. So you have a lot of times in the car. I mean, think about it. Maybe you take your kids to school in the morning. Maybe you pick them up in the afternoon. You take your kids to practices, to ball games, to music things, to, sporting practices, athletic practices. You take them to tournaments out of town or, 3-4 hours away. You have a lot of time in here, and there's a lot of opportunities to interact with their kids. Make the best use of that time. I mean, DVD players in the car, okay, they're a godsend when it comes to a long trip. I won't deny. 7-8 hour trips, yeah, turn that baby on and keep the kids shut. Mouth shut, right? But, if you're going to go to Walmart 5 to 10 minutes away, don't use that as your crutch. Use it as a time for teaching and communication, so you have to be intentional about this. And so maybe you pick up your kids from school and you ask them, okay, what did you do that was encouraging today? What did you do that showed respect today? One lady keeps a candy jar in her car, and when she asks that question, if they say, well, I saw a little girl, she sits at lunch every day by herself, and I went over and I sat with her today because I always feel sorry that she's all alone. And she gives her a piece of chocolate because she did something encouraging. She showed respect to someone. Jesus. Think about Jesus. He taught while he traveled. Now, Jesus didn't have a car to drive. He walked everywhere. Jesus didn't have kids. But he did have 12 disciples that acted like kids, all right? And so Jesus took advantage of his travel time to teach them. A great deal of his parables, a great deal of his teaching happened while he was traveling from one place to another place. Think about the Samaritan woman alongside the road. Think about the teaching that happened after he met with the Samaritan woman with his disciples. Think about after his resurrection on the road to Emmaus as he's speaking with these people. And later on they said, didn't the scriptures burn within us as he spoke? Jesus taught while he traveled, and we can do the same thing. And I want to encourage you to use the last 5 minutes of your trip to use it as a review time, a time to debrief, a time to ask questions, a time to strengthen lessons you're trying to teach your children. For instance, if you're going to someone's house maybe for dinner. So the last 5 minutes, you're going to say, okay, when we get to the Booth's house, all right, how are you going to act? You are not going to run around like wild and crazies. You're not going to jump all over the furniture. You're going to sit and you're going to behave. And when we sit down for dinner, all right, you're going to say please and you're going to say thank you and you're going to sit there the whole time. And so you start teaching them respect. You go through these questions or you review, you remind them, you are teaching them. And so many of you are doing a great job, I have to say, of raising your kids to be respectful. A couple examples. Last year, right after Heidi had her stroke, I'm sitting in the hospital and I get a text. It's a number I don't recognize. And I look at the text and it says, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I'm praying for you and Heidi. Nate Westbrook. Now here's a teenager in the church sending me a text like that. A couple days later, I get another one from him. Is there anything I can do for you while you're gone? You know, that's respect. We get back last year and Abby Wagner calls and says, hey, I'm writing a paper for college and I'd like to interview Heidi. And Heidi's like, well, she probably just needs a stroke victim, you know, something like that. And it ends up, she said, I need to write about someone that I look up to, that I admire. That's respect. But, you know, that doesn't happen unless the parents are planting seeds and teaching them respect. Look again at Deuteronomy 6:6-7. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. And I've made so many mistakes when it comes to teaching respect. And one of the things that we talked about a couple weeks ago is that you've got to be consistent. You've got to be consistent early on. And there has to be boundaries. And you've got to get involved in your kids' lives. But what I want to make certain is this, is you understand that while you are teaching in your van, in your car, it's not just a time to get on them for something they did wrong. It is a time to build into their lives. You're trying to reach their hearts. You're trying to get beneath the surface. You are trying to teach them respect. Behavior is an outgrowth of beliefs. And you're trying to get at the core of what they believe. And that's why you always come back to God's word in their life. It always comes back to God's word. You're trying to teach them every opportunity that you can. Remember what we talked about the first week. We said that you are raising them to release them. You're raising them to release them. And this is preparation time. So that means you use what time you have and you're traveling in your car sometimes for spiritual matters. You ask them spiritual questions because you want them to be able to defend their own faith. You know, if a teacher gets on them for being a Christian, they need to be able to stand up and say why they believe what they believe. You want them to get to a point where they understand that it's not their parents' faith that they're living, that it is their faith that they can live, and it's their choice to live that faith. In 1 Peter 3:15, Peter says, but in your heart revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you for the reason and the hope that you have. So you are raising your kids in a way that they understand why they have this faith. It's not your faith. It has to become their faith. Why they have this belief. And children, you need to understand that you need to respect and you need to honor your parents. Ephesians 6:1 says this. It talks about children. It says, obey your parents in the Lord. Now, there is a qualifier in there. It has to be scriptural, what your parents are asking you to do. And as long as it fits within Scripture, your job is to obey, to submit to their parental authority that you have in their lives. And if you think about it, moms and dads, make certain that you are a united front, that you are not undercutting the other person. Do not undercut your spouse. You are a team. You are a united front. I remember when I was a teenager and I was in the kitchen with my parents and I said something disrespectful to my mother. I don't think I've ever seen my dad get so mad in my life. And I deserved it. It was justifiable. And I never did that again because my dad disciplined me. And I learned a lesson that my mom and dad were a team. They were united. They would stand up for one another. And one of the things that I've observed is when children start to get out of control in this area of respect, and when parents start to slack in this area of respect, as quick as they get away from being respectful, you can bring them back just as quickly. And you may be thinking, man, I'm behind on this. I need to rein things in. Well, you know what? If you make that your choice to rein things in, yeah, it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. It might take some discipline. But you know what? You can do it. And they can become more respectful. Those adjustments can be made. And you may be beginning to realize, and I talked to a couple right before church, and they said this, and I don't even think they knew I was preaching on this. Parenting is tough. It's tough. It's a lot of work. It's hard. But can I also tell you, the end result, it can be great. It can be incredibly fulfilling. I love the way Craig Groeschel puts it. He says, if you don't want your family to turn out like every other family, then you need to raise your children differently than everyone else. How true. So, we have travel time, we have meal time, and then third, guess what? We have bedtime. And I'm not going to try to sit there, because I'm pretty sure I would bust that thing. All right, so I'll just sit right here beside it like it's bedtime and I'm sitting beside my child in bed. All right, but this is a great time. Again, listen to this verse. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, and when you lie down. When you lie down. And if you're not in the habit of doing this, get in the habit of doing this, and that is praying with your children at night. Going into their bedroom and just praying just for a few minutes. It doesn't have to be elaborate, because a little kid, they're not going to understand an elaborate prayer anyway. But you just want to pour into their lives for just a couple minutes. And this is a very personal place, because this room is filled with their stuff. You know, it's got their identity. It's got their drawers with their secret notes. You know, things that have been important to them. This is where they've kept things that they want. It's their posters on the wall. It shows their identity. It shows who they really are. It is a window into their life. And in the bedroom, it allows you, it's a place of privacy, but it's also a place that you should visit frequently, especially at nighttime before they go to bed, where you're going to get down with them and you're going to say just a little prayer with them to encourage them. And that's what you do in this room. You listen to them, you love them, you encourage them, and you pray with them. And merely your presence being there is teaching them that you respect their space. And when they learn that you're going to respect them, guess what they're going to do in return? They're going to respect you. I like the warning James Dobson gives, and this is especially to dads. Dobson says it like this: if you have a daughter, you had better show her Christ's pure love and appropriate touch. For if she doesn't get it from you, she will begin to seek it elsewhere. And so you love on your kids. You start when they are young. You show them appropriate love with hugs and kisses, you know, and you affirm them. You say you believe in them. You tell them they got what it takes. And I'm telling you that what your kids got to walk away from is they have to understand that they have a good relationship with you and that you are pouring into them, and they've got faith in God. And they need to know in their hearts that if you could choose any other child in this world to be your child, you would still choose them above all other children. And so you pray at night, and maybe you pray something like this: God, I can't wait to see how you are going to use this child. Not if, but how. And so that child goes to sleep at night not wondering, will God use me? Instead, they're wondering, I wonder how God will use me in the future. You see, the challenge is for us to be distinctive. We want to raise kids who are different. We want to raise kids who respect the Lord and respect their parents. Why? So that when we go out someone, we impress people and they go, oh, look how cool. He says, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. No, that's not it. It's because we are trying to model for them a relationship that we want them to have with their Heavenly Father. And parents, you have to teach responsibility. You have to encourage them. You have to teach them respect. And there have to be consequences when they don't show respect. And let me say to every young person in here, whether you're a child, whether you're a teenager, there is one command in the Bible specifically to you. There's a lot of commands for all of us, but there's one written specifically to you, and it's Ephesians chapter 6, and this is what it says. We already talked about it a little bit. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. And that's because when you submit to your parental authority here on earth, you are also submitting to your godly authority in heaven. So you want to raise kids that look like everyone else's kids? Do you want to raise grandkids that look like everyone else's grandkids? No. And grandparents, you need to be in this too. All right, when those kids come over to your house, you prepare them a special meal. Maybe the favorite meal that they love grandma or grandpa to fix for them. And you do creative things with them. You go to their ball games, and they come over to your house to stay. You go in the room at night and you pray with them before they go to bed because you want to leave a legacy. You want a family that has branches that extend out, that are branches of respect, branches of love, and branches of encouragement. And the Bible says that we are, as Christians, to be different. We are to be separate. We are to be a holy people. We are a nation that belongs to God. And remember, if we're going to change the nation, it's got to begin in your house and in my house. It's not going to happen in the White House. So as a family, what are you doing? When we show respect to our parents, when we teach respect to our kids, you look different, they look distinctive, and God is honored. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for the homes from which we've come. They're not perfect homes by any means. There are no perfect kids. There are no perfect parents. But Lord, we pray that we can become a family that you want us to be. That we look to your word, and your word is good, and your word teaches us good things. Your word teaches us how to be the family that you've called us to be the couple that you've called us to be the moms and dads that you've called us to be. And so, God, we just look to that word. We look to your advice. We look to you for teaching, for instruction, and for love. And I pray for each family here that they would learn to respect you and teach respect, all in the same method. And we pray these things in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen.